Welcome to the home of the Nashville Scottish Rite. My name is Dan Jones. I am the secretary of the Nashville Scottish Rite. This is our sign here on this building indicating the four bodies of the Nashville Scottish Rite: Makeda Lodge of Perfection, Emmanuel Chapter of Rose Croix, St. Michael Council of Kadosh, and Trinity Consistory. Come and spend some time with us. The Nashville Scottish Rite shares this building with the Grand Lodge of Tennessee. This is the main lobby of the Grand Lodge, and over my left shoulder is the picture of our current Grand Master, Brother Robert Reed. The other pictures in this lobby are past Grand Masters that are still living, with the exception of one who passed away this year, and that portrait is draped in black. We'll continue on to the library. This is the Scottish Rite Library. We have over 3,000 volumes of Masonic books, English literature, Robert Burns collection, Charles Dickens collection, many law books, books that are very, very old, very delicate, and some are very rare, and we cherish each one of them. We recently digitalized this library and did away with our card catalog system. We now have everything on computer that can be accessed from our website. So if you are doing research and looking for a certain book, you can go to the NashvilleScottishRite.org website and click on the library icon and enter the book by title or author and pull it up and see if we have that. And you're welcome to come and do research here in our library. The only thing in this particular room here that does not belong to the Scottish Rite are the portraits that you see above my head on the four surrounding walls. And they are the portraits of the first 25 Grand Masters of Tennessee. The Grand Lodge of Tennessee was chartered in 1813 under North Carolina. Prior to that, there were many Masons in Tennessee, but the lodges came under the charter of North Carolina, and in 1813 it was released to Tennessee. Our first Grand Master was Tom Claiborne. You see his first picture here, or he is the first one in the picture. He was an attorney. He was also a member of the House of Representatives and Speaker of the House. He served under Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. Next to him is Robert Searcy, who rode horseback from Nashville, Tennessee to Raleigh, North Carolina at the convening of their Grand Lodge communication and brought back a dispensation for Cumberland Lodge, which is still active. It recently merged with Corinthian Lodge in Tennessee, but Cumberland Lodge number 8 was one of the first lodges chartered under North Carolina. Hiram number 7 was actually first, and they still retain their original charter from North Carolina. Next is Wilkins Tannehill, who was a mayor of Nashville. And Wilkins Tannehill rewrote the ritual for Tennessee, the Masonic ritual, and our books that we are given called the Tennessee Craftsman, when a man becomes a Master Mason, is part of his original work. Next to him is Bliss Hayes. He was an attorney and a Presbyterian minister. Next to Bliss Hayes was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is one of two presidents that was a Grand Master. Harry Truman being the other president that was Grand Master also of Missouri. Andrew Jackson was a senator, a governor of the Florida Territory, Revolutionary War hero, general, and president. Next to him is Brother Cooper, who also served under Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. Brother Cooper was an educator and a banker. Next to him is Kennedy, who was an attorney that served on General Andrew Jackson's staff in the War of 1812. Then we get to Brother Hugh Dunlap, who was a member of our state legislature. He also served in the Mexican War. Next is Archibald Yell. Archibald Yell was an attorney. He served on Andrew Jackson's staff in the War of 1812. He also was a member of our state legislature and Speaker of the House. When Andrew Jackson was elected President of the United States, he appointed Archibald Yell as judge over the Arkansas Territory. After Arkansas became a state, he was elected their governor. Then in the 1840s, when the war with Mexico broke out, realizing now that he had served in 1812 with a group of the volunteers from Tennessee that went down into southern Alabama and northern Florida, knowing them, and they went on to Texas and were killed at the Alamo. Brother Yell re-enlisted in the military and was given the rank of colonel and led the Arkansas Brigade to the Battle of Buena Vista. In February of 1847, he was killed in that battle. 6 months later, men that served under him went back to that battlefield and exhumed his body and brought him back on a wagon to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and re-entombed him there in Fayetteville in the old city cemetery where his remains still lie. The man that served or that took Archibald Yell's place when he was killed in battle was not a Mason, but 3 years later became one, and it was a young captain named Albert Pike. And Tennessee has a very direct connection with Brother Albert Pike that wrote our Scottish Rite ritual. Next to Archibald Yell is Jennings. He was an attorney. He also served as Deputy Grand Master of Mississippi. Next to Brother Jennings, we have Brother Douglas, who was the mayor of Lebanon, Tennessee, which is about 40 miles east of Nashville. He also owned the first cotton press in the Southeast. Next to Brother Douglas is Brother Tappan, who was in the railroad industry. He served as Grand Master here, then later moved to Mississippi, and a few years later was elected Grand Master of Mississippi. Then he moved on to Texas and started a new railroad in the Midland, Odessa area. And we have, I love this man's name, Brother Julius Caesar Robertson. He was a state senator and served our state well in the legislature and the Senate. Next is Priestley, who was connected with Cumberland Law School, which continued to operate in the Nashville area until I think 1965. And then they sold the law department to Sanford in Birmingham, and that school now goes as Cumberland Law School at Sanford. Cumberland University now is a liberal arts college, and many of our state politicians attended school there. Next to Priestley is McManus. He was a local businessman in the Nashville area, ran a trading company up and down the Cumberland River, and hauled his wares on a flatboat. Next to him is Wilson, who was in the newspaper business. He operated one of the early newspapers in Nashville. Next to him is Joseph Norville. It is purely coincidental that he is directly across from Andrew Jackson, and they sit here day in, day out and glare at each other. Joseph Norville and his brother Moses Norville were the founders of the Whig Party in Tennessee, which started as an anti-Andrew Jackson party. It shows the brotherhood of the Masonic fraternity, that men of different opinions can leave their differences outside the door and come in and find common ground in fellowship and have camaraderie with each other. Next we have Dillahunty, who was a circuit judge. Dillahunty Lodge in Lewisburg, Tennessee is named after him. Next to him is Martin, who was a state senator. And next to Martin is Burton, who was a member of Mount Moriah Lodge number 18 in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. But he was also the U.S. consultant to the Isle of St. Thomas. A little more international politics there. Next to Burton is Robert Carruthers, who was the founder of Cumberland Law School. In 1863, Brother Carruthers was elected governor of Tennessee, but at that time there was a war going on among the North and the South, and divided interest on both sides. And another brother was our governor, Brother Andrew Johnson, who later became president. He called in Union troops, and they would not allow Brother Carruthers to be inaugurated or take office. He is Tennessee's only elected governor that never served. Next to him, we have Brother Fuller, who was in the newspaper industry. Next to Brother Fuller, we have Brother Hughes, who was a U.S. district attorney. And then Brother Dashel, who was another mayor of Nashville. After he was mayor, he became captain of a steamboat that sailed from Nashville to Cincinnati, and then back down the Ohio to the Mississippi and to New Orleans, and then back up. And the last brother in this room is Brother McCullough, who was in the newspaper industry in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is about 70 miles north of Nashville. That concludes our first 25 Grand Masters. There are a few in the quarters that I would like to point out to you, if you will follow me. That picture is Brother James Daniel Richardson, was Grand Master of Tennessee in 1873. He was Grand High Priest of the York Rite in 1883. In about 1888, he was appointed Sovereign Grand Inspector General of the Scottish Rite for Tennessee. And in 1900, he was elected Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite. He was a congressman. He ran the Library of Congress and lived in Washington during his tenure as Sovereign Grand Commander. He passed away in 1914, but in 1906 he turned the first shovel of dirt to lay the cornerstone of the House of the Temple that still stands in Washington, D.C. This man arranged for it to be built, but he never got to serve because he passed away before the biennial session of 1915. If you'll notice, his picture is not an oil portrait on canvas like his contemporaries were. His picture is a plain sheet of paper, and it's drawn with chalk and charcoal and pencil, which teaches us to go back to basics. He does not have on a Grandmaster collar or an apron like the other Grandmasters do. Just a plain picture of himself drawn with chalk, charcoal, and pencil. And in our Tennessee ritual in the entered apprentice degree, and this is part that is written down so I can quote it and not divulge any of the secrets of Masonry that some people think are really secrets, but they're not. But in our stereoptic, the very last paragraph says, "Our ancient brethren serve the Master with freedom, fervency, and zeal," which is symbolically illustrated by chalk, charcoal, and clay. For there's nothing more free than chalk at the slightest touch leaves a trace, nothing more fervent than charcoal, when properly ignited, melts the most ardent metals, and nothing more zealous than clay or Mother Earth. For from the earth we came, and to the earth we must all inevitably return. Chalk, charcoal, and pencil lead, which was as close as he could get to clay to draw his picture. And he never told anyone about it. He waited till someone could discover that, and it would take them back to the basics of what Freemasonry is about. Now let's go upstairs and take a look at our main auditorium. This is our main auditorium. It's where the Grand Lodge holds its annual communication, and this is where we confer the Scottish Rite degrees. Masonry is full of symbolism, and one thing that we miss is the symbolism of this floor that I'm standing on. Most lodges have it. Some have covered it with carpet. Some don't have it. Some put a piece of carpet down that has black and white squares on it. We're told in our ritual that it's a representation of the ground floor of King Solomon's temple, checkered with good and evil. And man, as a conscious being, can make his choice if he wants to take the good steps or the evil steps. But also, in the fellowcraft degree, we're taught about the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And they progress in importance as they progress in number. And the 7th step, or liberal arts and science, is astronomy. Right before that is music. And most rituals do not say much about music, but music was a big part of Masonry. Our major composers, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, were Masons, and they loved Masonry. This floor represents music. Think of the keys of a piano, black and white. The whites are the major chords, the blacks are the minor chords, or the flat chords, or notes. As you study music theory, you learn that you can augment a minor chord and make it into a major chord. A major chord has a light and lively sound, and it's for happy type music. The minor chord has a dark, dreary sound. When you augment the minor chord, you raise the third note in the series of notes that make that chord one step. And music for hundreds of years has called it raising the third. And that's where we get raising to the third degree, or raising from darkness to light, from ignorance to intellectual knowledge. Think about that the next time you go in your lodge and see that floor and realize that there's more to it than just the symbolism of representing the ground floor of King Solomon's temple, because the ground floor of that temple represented music also. The men that built this building, of which James Daniel Richardson, whom we just talked about, as you could see, was a very progressive, forward-thinking man. He was associated with some other members in this valley because this was his valley. They had ideas of what they wanted. And the architect on this building was a man named Christian Asmuth, who was a German immigrant that came over here in the 1800s and had an architectural firm, and he was a member of the Scottish Rite. They put some indications in here that follow the symbolism pattern so that whatever happened to this building, they would want it to be known, if someone really took the time to look, that it was a Masonic building. And not only that, but a Scottish Rite building. This first row of steps right over here on either side of this auditorium, from the bottom to the top, there are 33 steps, indicating the 33rd and last degree of Freemasonry. Interestingly enough, from this level up to the next level in the rear of the auditorium, the number of steps going up to the doorways total 28, which is one of the most esoteric degrees in Masonry. And our early brothers knew this because they were very studious members of Masonry. In Morals and Dogma that Albert Pike wrote in the 1850s, it's roughly 1,000 pages long, 980, something like that. It covers 32 degrees, from the entered apprentice degree to the master of the royal secret, or 32nd degree. If you do that arithmetic, that would be anywhere 33 to 35 pages per degree. Albert Pike spends 240 pages on the 28th degree. He felt like it was important, and we do too. So the number of steps going to the next level are 28. The number of steps going from this floor down to the next floor in the rear stairwells of the building are 32, 4 flights of 8 steps each. If you go down the front steps to the lobby of the building, there are 30 steps indicating the Council of Kadosh. He had to change the rise of the steps, the architect did, to make this work out. So we know that it was planned and not an accident. From the next floor up to the top floor, and from the floor beneath us to the basement, In all four corners, there's 26 steps. 26 takes a long time to figure out. The steps are divided into 2 flights of 13 steps each. 13 indicates that we are not superstitious. Masonry is not built on superstition. It is built on facts and what's in the hearts of men. But the number 26 has a higher, more definite meaning to Masonry. We have to realize that what we're looking for is the name of deity. What do we call that? In our Bible, in the Old Testament, they pronounced God's name by letters only, which in the King James Version of the Bible is Yahweh. But then we have to realize that the foundings of Masonry, the foundation is built sternly in the Kabbalah. So if we go to the Hebrew Bible and translate the letters Yahweh to the Hebrew letters, it's Yud Ho Ha Veh. Yud Ho Ha Veh, Yahovah. You can see where we got the name Jehovah out of that. If we give each letter in the Hebrew alphabet a numerical number, such as A is 1, B is 2, there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And the total numerical value of Yud Ho Ha Veh is 26. These brothers knew that, and that's why they arranged this building so that there would be 26 steps from the next floor down to the bottom floor, and from the next floor up to the top floor. It's been a great time giving you a tour of this building. Before we close, I'd like to tell you a couple of things that the Scottish Rite does here in Nashville. We support the Vanderbilt Bill Wilkerson Speech and Hearing Center as our philanthropy for the Scottish Rite Foundation. Our almoner has numerous ambulatory equipment, such as you can see behind me here, some of our motorized wheelchairs and regular wheelchairs. We also have about 40 hospital beds, numerous walkers, bedside tables, potty chairs, anything that someone may need in the Middle Tennessee jurisdiction. We send it to them or deliver it to them at no charge. They use it as long as they need it, and then we come and pick it up and return it, sterilize it properly. We work with Williams Surgical Company here in Nashville for the proper sterilization of this equipment. We have a couple of treasures I'd like to tell you about. One, we talked a little bit about James Daniel Richardson from the Nashville Valley that made it all the way to Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite. And when he was elected that position, the Nashville Scottish Rite had a sword made for him that is very unique. And you can see that it has elephant ivory on the handle. In the heel of the sword, it has an amethyst. There are two 33rd degree rings right here Butting up against the elephant ivory handle, that amethyst is worth over $75,000 today. As you can see, there are two models of the 33rd degree ring, the triple rings of gold, but this is not gold. And the elephant ivory handle, the jewels around the head or the hilt of the sword, and on each side, this is about a 2-carat diamond. The blade is Damascus steel of very high quality. I had the sword appraised for our insurance purposes. The blade itself, just the metal of this quality to make the sword blade, was over $2,500. That amethyst was about $75,000. There's numerous jewels in it, and the total appraisal that we got on the sword was over $300,000. And that was presented to James Daniel Richardson when he became Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite. At his death, his wife returned it to the Scottish Rite office here, and we keep it in our vault here. In 1910, our brothers at a stated meeting decided to assess every member of the Scottish Rite 10 pennyweight in gold. 10 pennyweight is about a half an ounce, and gold at that time was selling at $21.67 an ounce. So they were asking for about $11 worth of gold. Realize this was 1910. And they didn't want just any gold. They wanted family heirloom jewelry, because the Scottish Rite is a family. That's why we call it a reunion when we take in new members. We have various committees and teams in the Scottish Rite, such as our stage crew, our kitchen crew, our greeting crew, our documentation crew. These guys all work with each other very closely and stay in contact throughout the year within their committees, but then twice a year at our reunions, they come together like a family reunion. And that's why we call it a reunion. But they wanted family heirloom gold that was too worn out to wear, but still had family sentimental value. 61 members contributed old wedding rings, brooches, tie tacks, watch cases. At that time, 1910 was before the wristwatch was invented. A watch was a pocket watch, and even a gold-filled watch had a good amount of gold in it. Those 61 members contributed gold that was valued at $301.22. Then they took up a cash collection, and 184 members gave all they could afford to this process that amounted to $488. The lodge paid the difference of $195.28 to get a total of $984.50 of gold value and cash. They sent that to the Gorham Company in New York City and had a chalice cast to use in our degrees that we do here. We have used this in every 14th degree and 18th degree and Maundy Thursday service since 1911, when we received this $984.50 chalice. And it has grown in value at this time to over $250,000. And we still use this and will continue to use this in every reunion and Maundy Thursday service. It has on the base of the chalice the same symbols that you saw at our sign at the beginning of this building, indicating the Lodge of Perfection, the Chapter of Rose Croix, the Council of Kadosh, and the Consistory. This is one of our treasures that we have here at the Scottish Rite, and a treasure, the best way to celebrate it is to use it, and we will continue to do so. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking this tour with me. It has been a real pleasure to have you in our midst.